Vikings get sold as explorers and warriors. Almost nobody talks about the uncomfortable parts. The ritual knife cuts on female captives, the forced participation in funeral pyres, the sacred groves where women disappeared after Norse victories, ceremonial violations that serve both gods and power, religious rites twisted into systematic terror. Which of these is legend, and which one sits in shallow graves and witness testimonies? The rites were real. Ibn Fadlan's ship burial account. The Rus funeral on the Volga. Archaeological evidence from ritual sites across Scandinavia. The Vikings didn't just capture women for slavery, they forced them into sacred ceremonies that history textbooks skip entirely. If you value documented Viking and Norse-era history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Ibn Fadlan's eyewitness accounts and archaeological evidence from ritual sites. Now back to the story. 2. On the Volga River. Ibn Fadlan witnesses what he calls the most terrible thing. A Rus chieftain dies. His funeral requires a volunteer from among his slave women. The woman chosen undergoes 10 days of ritual preparation. Fadlan documents every detail. What happens next reveals the darkest intersection of Viking religion and cruelty. The volunteer doesn't volunteer. Archaeological evidence suggests the selection process involved coercion disguised as honor. Burial sites across Scandinavia contain female remains, showing trauma markers consistent with forced compliance. The Vikings frame horror as sacred duty. Day 1 of preparation. The chosen woman receives special treatment, rich foods, fine clothing, ceremonial washing. Fadlan notes she seems joyful, but contemporary accounts from other sources describe the preparation as psychological manipulation. Isolation from other captives, constant supervision. The Vikings know broken resistance looks like acceptance. The ritual preparation serves multiple purposes. Public demonstration of Norse power over captives, religious theater for the community, psychological warfare against remaining prisoners. The Vikings understand that forcing participation in their sacred rites destroys cultural identity more effectively than simple brutality. Norse funeral practices require female sacrifice according to multiple sources. The Ynglinga saga describes similar ceremonies. Archaeological evidence from ship burials at Oseberg and Gokstad reveals female remains with trauma indicators. The Vikings systematically incorporate captive women into their death rituals. The 10-day preparation involves specific ceremonies, daily visits to the dead chieftain, ritualized sexual encounters with male tribe members. Fadlan records, each man who has intercourse with her says, "Tell your master I did this out of love for him." The Vikings force women to participate in ceremonies that violate every aspect of their identity. Sacred groves feature in multiple accounts. Adam of Bremen describes ritual sites in Uppsala where human sacrifices occur every 9 years. Archaeological. Excavations at Gamla Uppsala reveal bone deposits consistent with mass ceremonial killings. Female remains show specific trauma patterns. Ritual knife marks. Evidence of systematic violence disguised as religious practice. The psychological component proves crucial. Vikings force captive women to participate willingly in their own destruction, breaking cultural taboos, violating religious beliefs. The ceremonies serve as public demonstrations that Norse gods command obedience even from enemy populations. If you value documented Viking and Norse-era history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from medieval chronicles and burial archaeology. Now back to the story. Fertility rituals involve captive women in spring ceremonies. The Heimskringla describes seasonal rites requiring female participation. Archaeological evidence from ritual sites shows bone deposits concentrated during specific months, spring equinox, summer solstice, harvest festivals. The Vikings time their ceremonies to agricultural cycles and military campaigns. The ship burial ceremony climaxes on day 10. Fadlan provides explicit details. The woman drinks alcohol, mixed with unknown substances, likely psychoactive compounds to ensure compliance. Contemporary accounts describe similar drugging practices at other ritual sites. The Vikings use pharmacological control to maintain the appearance of willing participation. Multiple men participate in the final ceremony. Fadlan counts 6 individuals involved in the ritual violation before the killing. The act serves religious, political, and psychological purposes simultaneously, honoring the dead chieftain, demonstrating power over captives, creating trauma bonds among the Norse participants. The killing itself follows specific ritual requirements. Strangulation and stabbing performed simultaneously. 2 different executioners. The method ensures religious compliance while guaranteeing death. Fadlan describes the precise choreography. every movement scripted by tradition. The Vikings have systematized murder as sacred performance. Burial evidence confirms ritual patterns across Scandinavia. Female remains in ship burials show consistent trauma markers. Neck injuries from strangulation, stab wounds in ritual locations. The archaeological record validates written accounts. This wasn't isolated to the Volga. The Vikings practiced ceremonial murder throughout their territory. Sacred prostitution appears in multiple sources. Adam of Bremen describes temple practices at Uppsala involving captive women, forced participation in fertility rituals, religious ceremonies that function as systematic sexual violence. The Vikings disguise assault as divine service. The psychological warfare extends beyond individual ceremonies. Public nature of the rituals ensures all captives witness the fate awaiting resistance. Community participation normalizes the violence. Children observe adults treating horror as sacred duty. The Vikings create cultural trauma that spans generations. Seasonal ceremonies require regular supplies of female victims. Spring planting rituals, midsummer festivals, harvest celebrations, winter solstice observations. The religious calendar demands systematic violence disguised as divine worship. Viking raiding patterns align with ceremonial schedules. Archaeological evidence reveals specialized ritual sites across Scandinavia. Stone circles with human bone deposits, sacred wells containing female remains, temple complexes with evidence of systematic killing. The Vikings build infrastructure dedicated to ceremonial murder. The drugging component appears in multiple accounts: psychoactive mushrooms, fermented beverages with unknown additives, herbal compounds that induce compliance. The Vikings understand pharmacological control ensures apparent consent, forced participation disguised as willing sacrifice. Ritual scarification precedes major ceremonies, knife cuts in specific patterns, symbolic markings that identify victims for sacrifice. Archaeological evidence shows healed cut marks on female remains from ritual sites. The Vikings mark their intended victims like livestock. The public nature serves psychological purposes. Entire communities witness the ceremonies. Children observe normalized violence. Captives understand their potential fate. The Vikings use ritual terror as population control mechanism. Sacred timing follows astronomical events, lunar cycles, seasonal changes, agricultural calendars. The Vikings align their ceremonial violence with natural rhythms. Religion provides schedule and justification for systematic brutality. Temple archaeology reveals the scale. Uppsala's excavations show bone deposits from hundreds of individuals, mostly female remains, evidence of systematic killing over decades. The Vikings operate ceremonial death machines disguised as religious sites. The selection process involves specific criteria, age requirements, physical appearance standards, cultural background preferences. The Vikings choose victims based on religious specifications that maximize psychological impact on captive populations. Forced participation extends beyond the primary victim. Other captive women required to assist in preparations, washing the body, preparing ceremonial items, witnessing the final act. The Vikings force entire communities of prisoners to participate in ritualized murder. The religious justification provides psychological cover for participants. Sacred duty eliminates moral responsibility. Divine command supersedes human conscience. The Vikings use religious belief to normalize systematic cruelty among their own population. Archaeological evidence from mass graves near ritual sites tells the complete story. Female remains showing ritual trauma markers. Evidence of systematic killing disguised as religious ceremony. Bone chemistry indicating drugging. The Vikings didn't just practice religion, they weaponized sacred belief to justify industrial-scale murder. Contemporary witnesses describe the psychological aftermath. Among survivors, captive women who witnessed the ceremonies displayed trauma behaviors consistent with modern torture victims. The Vikings understood that forcing participation in religious violations breaks human identity more completely than simple physical violence. The coercion mechanisms reveal sophisticated psychological manipulation. Captive women told they're chosen by gods. Special status within prisoner communities. Enhanced food rations during preparation periods. The Vikings understand that manufactured consent appears more legitimate than obvious force. Broken women become accomplices in their own destruction. Ibn Fadlan describes the Angel of Death, an elderly woman who supervises ritual killings. Archaeological evidence from burial sites suggests this role existed across Scandinavia. Specialized executioners trained in ceremonial murder. Female remains at ritual sites show consistent trauma patterns, suggesting standardized killing techniques. The drugging process follows specific recipes. Contemporary accounts mention sacred beverages that induce compliance. Chemical analysis of Viking-era vessels reveals residues consistent with psychoactive compounds. Ergot-contaminated grain. Fermented honey with mushroom additives. The Vikings developed pharmacological methods to ensure victim cooperation. Ritual timing aligns with military campaigns. Spring raids coincide with fertility ceremonies requiring female sacrifice. Summer expeditions time to coincide with solstice. Rituals. The Vikings coordinate warfare and religious practices to maintain steady supplies of victims for ceremonial killing. The preparation rituals serve multiple audiences. Captive populations witness the process. Norse communities participate. In normalized violence, children observe adults treating murder as divine service. The Vikings use ceremonial killing as community bonding exercise that desensitizes participants to systematic cruelty. Archaeological evidence reveals specialized ritual implements, ceremonial knives found at temple sites, strangulation devices with religious markings, restraint systems designed for specific ceremonies. The Vikings manufacture tools dedicated to ritualized murder. Sacred violence requires sacred instruments. The victim selection process involves religious divination, casting lots, reading omens, interpreting dreams. The Vikings disguise deliberate choice as divine selection. Random chance provides psychological cover for systematic targeting of specific individuals based on practical criteria. Contemporary chronicles describe the aftermath trauma among survivor populations. Women who witnessed ritual killings display symptoms consistent with modern torture victims. Emotional withdrawal, inability to form relationships, chronic terror responses. The Vikings understand psychological warfare extends beyond individual ceremonies. Sacred prostitution encompasses broader practices than temple rituals. Captive women forced to service multiple tribe members during religious festivals. Fertility ceremonies requiring mass participation. Seasonal celebrations involving systematic sexual violence disguised as divine worship. The Vikings institutionalized assault within religious frameworks. The religious justification provides legal protection for perpetrators. Sacred duty supersedes secular law. Divine command eliminates moral responsibility. Participants claim religious obligation when questioned by outside authorities. The Vikings weaponize spiritual belief to create legal immunity for systematic cruelty. Bone chemistry analysis reveals the drugging timeline. Psychoactive compounds appear and remains weeks before death. Long-term pharmaceutical manipulation to ensure compliance. The Vikings don't just drug victims immediately before ceremonies. They condition them over extended periods to accept their fate. Ritual scarification serves identification purposes beyond symbolic meaning. Specific cut patterns indicate intended ceremony type. Seasonal markings, deity dedications, sacrifice. Schedules. The Vikings developed systematic marking to organize their human inventory for religious killing. The community participation extends beyond Norse populations. Captive women forced to assist in ceremony preparations. Enemy populations required to witness ritual killings. The Vikings make conquered peoples complicit in religious violence against their own members. Archaeological excavations at Borg reveal industrial-scale ritual killing. Bone deposits containing hundreds of female remains. Evidence of systematic processing over decades. Specialized buildings dedicated to ceremonial murder. The Vikings operate religious death camps disguised as temple complexes. Contemporary Islamic sources describe similar practices among Rus traders. Al-Masudi records ritual killings during commercial expeditions. Female slaves sacrificed to ensure favorable trading conditions. The Vikings export their religious violence along trade routes throughout Europe and Asia. The psychological preparation involves cultural violation techniques, forcing Christian captives to participate in pagan ceremonies, making Muslim women violate Islamic law, compelling adherents of enemy religions to betray their fundamental beliefs. The Vikings understand spiritual trauma creates deeper compliance than physical torture alone. Sacred timing follows complex astronomical calculations, lunar phases for specific ceremonies, stellar alignments for seasonal rituals, solar events for major sacrifices. The Vikings develop sophisticated calendars coordinating religious killing with celestial events. The drugging technology evolves over centuries. Early accounts describe crude alcohol mixtures. Later sources mention refined psychoactive preparations. Archaeological evidence shows increasing sophistication in vessel design for administering compliance drugs. The Vikings' perfect pharmaceutical coercion through systematic experimentation. Ritual site archaeology reveals specialized architecture. Underground chambers for ceremony preparations, elevated platforms for public executions, drainage systems for blood disposal. The Vikings engineer their religious spaces to optimize systematic killing while maintaining ceremonial requirements. The victim processing follows assembly line principles. Standardized preparation procedures, scheduled ceremony. Times, specialized personnel for each function. The Vikings apply industrial organization to religious murder. Sacred killing becomes mechanical process designed for maximum efficiency. Contemporary accounts describe the psychological effects on Norse participants. Normalized violence among community members. Children who grow up witnessing systematics. Killing. Adults who participate in ceremonial murder as routine religious duty. The Vikings create cultural trauma that spans generations within their own populations. The international trade in ritual victims extends beyond military raids, specialized merchants who supply temple sites with appropriate sacrifice candidates, commercial networks dedicated to providing religious murder victims. The Vikings develop economic systems based on systematic killing disguised as divine service. Archaeological evidence from grave goods reveals the social status of ritual killing specialists. Wealthy burials for individuals associated with ceremonial murder. High-status artifacts in graves near temple complexes. The Vikings reward expertise in religious violence with social advancement and material wealth. The documentation techniques preserve ceremony details for replication. Written instructions for ritual procedures. Standardized killing methods recorded in runic script. Training materials for ceremonial executioners. The Vikings systematize religious murder through detailed record-keeping that ensures consistent practices across geographic regions. Chemical analysis of ritual vessels reveals sophisticated pharmacological knowledge, precise dosages for maintaining victim compliance, compound mixtures designed to induce specific psychological states. The Vikings develop advanced understanding of psychoactive substances applied to ceremonial coercion. The religious calendar demands regular supplies of female victims throughout the year. Monthly ceremonies requiring individual sacrifices, seasonal festivals needing mass killings, annual celebrations demanding specialized victim categories. The Vikings coordinate raiding schedules with ceremonial requirements to maintain steady inventory. Contemporary witness accounts describe the sensory manipulation during ceremonies, controlled lighting conditions, specific musical accompaniment, incense designed to alter consciousness. The Vikings understand environmental factors enhance psychological control during ritual killing. Archaeological excavations reveal evidence of victim resistance despite drugging and psychological manipulation. Defensive wounds on female remains, signs of struggle during ceremony preparation, restraint marks indicating forced compliance. Some captive women fought back even under chemical influence and spiritual coercion. The aftermath disposal follows specific religious requirements. Body positioning in ritual burials, grave goods selection based on ceremony type, site preparation according to seasonal timing. The Vikings treat murder victims as sacred objects requiring precise handling to maintain religious validity. The training programs for ceremonial executioners reveal institutional knowledge, apprenticeship systems for learning ritual killing techniques, specialized schools attached to major temples, master executioners who teach standardized methods across Norse territories. The Vikings professionalize religious murder through formal education systems. Contemporary Byzantine sources describe encounters with Rus traders who openly discuss ceremonial requirements. Diplomatic accounts mention negotiations for temple supplies during commercial meetings. The Vikings normalize ritual killing in international business contexts. Sacred murder becomes routine commodity exchange. Archaeological evidence from a burqa reveals the logistics coordination. Warehouse facilities for storing ritual victims before ceremonies, scheduling systems carved in runic calendars, transport arrangements for moving captives between raiding sites and temple. Locations. The Vikings develop supply chain management for religious killing. The seasonal demand creates predictable raiding patterns. Spring fertility ceremonies require young women. Summer solstice rituals need pregnant captives. Autumn harvest. Festivals demand elderly female prisoners. Winter death ceremonies call for virgin sacrifices. Norse military campaigns align with ceremonial calendars to ensure appropriate victim availability. Chemical residue analysis from ceremonial vessels reveals regional variations in drugging methods. Northern territories favor mushroom-based compounds. Southern regions prefer fermented grain preparations. Coastal areas utilize seaweed-derived psychoactive substances. The Vikings adapt pharmaceutical coercion to local botanical resources. The record-keeping systems track victim inventory with commercial precision, runic tablets listing captive names and ceremony assignments, age classifications for ritual requirements, health assessments for sacrifice quality. The Vikings manage human beings like livestock designated for religious slaughter. Contemporary Frankish chronicles describe the terror tactics employed during raids, specifically targeting female populations, coordinated sweeps designed to maximize capture rates, specialized equipment for restraining women during transport, modified longships with holding areas for female prisoners. The Vikings engineer their warfare around ceremonial murder requirements. Archaeological. Excavations at Jelling reveal the scale of royal participation in ritual killing. Mass grave sites adjacent to royal burial mounds, bone evidence showing systematic killing during succession ceremonies, royal grave goods including specialized execution implements, Danish kings participate directly in ceremonial murder as religious duty. The victim preparation facilities operate like factory systems. Standardized processing procedures, assembly line organization for ceremony preparation, quality control measures to ensure ritual compliance. The Vikings industrialize religious killing through systematic operational methods. Ibn Rusta provides additional details about Rus funeral practices involving multiple female victims, hierarchical sacrifice systems based on social status. Primary: wives killed first, secondary women executed in order of importance, slave women murdered last. The Vikings stratify ceremonial killing according to social rankings. Contemporary Irish sources describe the psychological warfare employed during monastery raids. Vikings forced nuns to participate in pagan ceremonies before killing them, public violation of Christian religious vows, systematic destruction of spiritual identity before physical murder. The Vikings understand cultural trauma enhances terror, effects among Christian populations. The pharmaceutical knowledge extends beyond simple intoxication. Compounds designed to induce specific emotional states. Euphoria-producing substances to simulate willing participation. Terror-enhancing drugs to maximize psychological impact on witnesses. The Vikings developed sophisticated understanding of psychoactive chemistry applied to ceremonial coercion. Archaeological bone analysis reveals evidence of systematic torture preceding ritual killing. Healed fractures indicating prolonged abuse. Malnutrition markers from controlled starvation. Dental damage from forced feeding of ceremonial substances. The Vikings employ extended cruelty to break victim resistance before ceremonial murder. The temple architecture facilitates psychological manipulation. Acoustic design that amplifies screams for maximum terror impact. Lighting systems that create disorienting effects during ceremonies. Spatial organization that forces witnesses to observe. Ritual killing from close proximity. The Vikings engineer their sacred spaces to maximize psychological trauma. Contemporary Arabic sources describe the international reputation of Norse ceremonial practices. Islamic merchants who refuse to trade with Rus dealers known for ritual killing. Byzantine officials who document ceremonial murder in diplomatic reports. The Vikings' religious violence becomes internationally notorious among trading partners. The victim selection criteria reveal systematic targeting based on psychological impact. Pregnant women chosen for fertility ceremonies. Young mothers selected for maximum community trauma. Religious figures targeted for cultural destruction. The Vikings choose sacrifice victims to maximize terror effects on captive populations. Archaeological. Evidence from Leisure shows continuous ritual killing over multiple centuries. Bone deposits spanning 300 years, evidence of evolving ceremony techniques. Increasing sophistication in killing methods over time. The Vikings refine their religious murder practices through sustained experimentation. The community bonding aspects create cultural dependency on ceremonial violence. Norse social cohesion maintained through shared participation in ritual killing. Religious festivals that require community involvement in systematic murder. The Vikings build their cultural identity around collective participation in sacred violence. Contemporary Slavic sources describe the terror tactics employed during river raids along the Dnieper. Coordinated attacks on riverside settlements during religious festivals when women gather for community celebrations. The Vikings time their raids to coincide with enemy religious observances to maximize female captive yields for ceremonial purposes. The disposal methods follow specific religious protocols, body positioning according to seasonal alignments, grave depth requirements based on ceremony type, site selection criteria for maintaining sacred geography. The Vikings treat murdered victims as religious artifacts requiring precise handling to preserve ceremonial validity. Archaeological excavations reveal evidence of resistance networks among captive women, hidden weapons caches and holding facilities, escape tunnel systems beneath ritual sites, coordinated suicide attempts to avoid ceremony participation. Some female prisoners organize collective resistance despite pharmaceutical coercion and psychological manipulation. The international demand drives specialized raiding expeditions. Islamic buyers who request specific victim types for their own ceremonial purposes. Byzantine merchants who purchase ritually experienced women for temple slavery. The Vikings develop export markets for women already broken through ceremonial participation. Contemporary accounts describe the psychological conditioning of child witnesses. Young Vikings who grow up observing ritual killing as normal religious practice. Children who participate in ceremony preparation as educational training. The Vikings create generational cycles of normalized violence through systematic exposure to ritualized murder. The economic integration makes ceremonial killing central to Norse prosperity. Temple revenues from sacrifice-related commerce. Raiding. Expeditions, financed through victim sales. Trade relationships dependent on reliable supplies of ceremonial murder victims. The Vikings build their economic expansion on systematic religious violence. Archaeological analysis of cremation sites reveals the scale of mass ceremonial killing during major religious festivals. Bone fragments from dozens of individuals burned. Simultaneously, evidence of coordinated murder events involving entire captive populations. The Vikings stage mass sacrifice ceremonies that function as religious theater designed to terrorize enemy populations and strengthen Norse cultural identity. A Christian missionary's account from 980 near Hedeby describes the psychological aftermath. The women who survive speak not of their sisters, their minds broken like pottery. But excavations around the mission site reveal why. Mass graves containing evidence of ritual killing, bone chemistry showing pharmaceutical coercion. The Vikings didn't just murder women in religious ceremonies, they destroyed the survivors' ability to bear witness, creating silence through systematic trauma that erased the evidence from living memory.